Welcome to Worth Your Time with your hosts from the nationally syndicated Bob and Tom Show, Kristi Lee, and the president and CEO of the Indianapolis Zoo, Dr. Rob Shumaker. Our mission to inform, entertain, and educate with guests from all aspects of life. We guarantee there isn't another podcast that features two hosts with such different backgrounds and discussions with remarkable people doing exceptional things. So let's get started. Here are your hosts, Kristi Lee and Dr. Rob Shumaker.
We welcome you to Worth Your Time with Dr. Rob Shumaker. I'm Kristi Lee, and our guest is Tyler Mayer. And if you're just joining us, you've missed a wonderful first episode of talking about the new Pope Leo.
Go back and listen.
You got to go back and listen. We are all Catholics. We're going to be transparent about that.
Yes.
But this is not necessarily a religious-y show.
No.
Is that a word, religious-y?
It
I
is
don't
now.
think so.
Yeah, well, I'll use it.
Yeah.
You're an
I'll use
expert
it.
in the spoken word.
No,
I think
I
it
am.
is
Hardly.
now.
Wow.
Don't you listen? I get corrected every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard sitting next to a scientist.
I'm not talking about him.
Oh, you mean on your other
believe
show?
me, I
don't
don't
sit
sit
next
next
to
to
a
I see.
scientist.
Correct, Kristi.
That's true. That's true.
Wow.
I sit next to something, but he ain't a scientist. For those of you who don't know, I'm on a radio show called The Bob and Tom Show, and we're talking about Tom. I'll say it.
Yeah.
So we are going to pick up where we left off. We were talking about Pope Leo. We're all very excited. How big is it for us to have an American Pope?
It is something I never thought I'd ever see. And I don't know that any Catholic in America ever thought they would see.
I agree.
And it's also, I think, it's encouraging for lots of different levels. But I'm convinced, he's from Chicago.
Right.
And I'm convinced that one of the only reasons that he was elected Pope, coming from Chicago, is that it's because he's not a Cubs fan. Because if you've been a Cubs fan, that's too much power.
Yeah.
They're too popular. I don't think they would have voted him Pope.
And he doesn't drink Old Style. Probably helps.
And
Probably
don't you think it
Yeah.
was relevant? That was the first thing the media interviewed his
Oh.
brothers about. Well, we heard he's a Cubs fan.
It tells you the culture of Chicago. So I grew up outside of Chicago, and it made all the sense in the world that once everyone found out from Chicago, it wasn't the question of what church did he grow up in or what high school he go to. The first question was, is he a Cubs or White Sox fan?
Yep.
It made sense.
Mom was a Cubs fan. He was a White Sox fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
South side of Chicago, he had to be a
So-
White Sox fan.
Sounds
right?
like a smart guy to me.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any connection, even a tiny one, with his family? Your
No,
bro-
not
you grew
me.
up in a similar area, right?
So I unfortunately grew up in a northwest suburb.
Okay.
So I'm actually in Cubs territory,
Yeah,
but
you
I
are.
am a Chicago White Sox fan.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, not that it's about me. It'd be about the Pope, but me for a minute.
Gotcha.
We moved from Ohio to Chicago when I was in second grade. 'Cause my dad's, the construction company he worked for, built the new White Sox park.
Oh.
So getting to go to the
okay.
park
Oh,
when he was
wow.
building it,
That's different.
different, yeah. So, but it was hard. It was not easy. Talk
bet.
about living a very difficult upbringing. Half to being a White Sox fan in Cubs territory. I had to overcome a lot of obstacles.
Is that what made you want to become a priest?
Yeah, because I mean, I felt like I needed to be. I felt like the lamb to the slaughter at
Sure.
most of the time, and I think I can relate to Jesus, and I should just do this. Then it was an easy jump.
Really?
Yeah, easy.
So why didn't you make the complete leap?
Oh, not tough enough, not smart enough.
That I don't believe.
Well, I'll tell you the true story. So I was in the seminary, and
2 years, right?
2 years in the seminary,
Mhm.
and so you do. I was in minor, so I went from high school to college. That's minor seminaries. They're college seminary days, what
Okay.
they call it, and you go to major seminary
So it's
after college,
Kind of like med school. And
kind of like
go
med
to
school.
residency.
Yeah, just not nearly as cool. And I made a deal with God. So I was in seminary for 2 years, and I thought I really could see myself becoming a priest. And I just wanted to be on my own for a little bit. I hadn't really gone out and lived life too much. I wanted to do that. So I made a deal with God, and I said, I'm going to transfer to Purdue University. If I don't meet anybody, don't have any other life epiphanies, I'll go back in the seminary after I graduate from college. And you know how it is when you make a deal with God. It always goes exactly how you think it will go. And I go to Purdue and didn't have any other life epiphanies, hadn't met anybody. It was about a month before graduation. I was thinking about going back in the seminary. I was thinking about becoming a Jesuit or a Franciscan or a Mary Knoll priest or a Dawson priest. And about a month before graduation, I accidentally started dating who would be my future wife. And how do you accidentally start dating somebody?
That was going to be my question.
That's a story for another time. But
Okay.
what I realized is that she's from Indianapolis. And since she was the only girl that would ever date me, I thought I should probably move here after graduation. I did that, and then we got engaged a few months later, and here I am. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's why I
Interesting.
didn't become a priest. She stole me away from God.
Boil
There
her
you go.
up.
Yeah.
Boy, she must be something.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, she is.
Boy, that's impressive. If I would wear that on my chest. I
Oh, yeah.
stole my husband from God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she feels
Yeah.
pretty good going into the confessional with that on her. You know what I mean? That you're really going in strong with that.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now you jumped to theology as a degree.
I did, yep. So I kept with the theology. You do philosophy undergrad and theology in your grad work when you go through a seminary. And so it kind of kept on that path. And then in that process became a youth minister for a couple of years at St. Luke Catholic Church on the north side.
Sure.
And then worked at Bishop Chatard High School for 13 years and taught theology for 8 of those 13 years and loved every minute of it. So, yeah.
And this is not the first conclave you've been through
No.
as a teacher.
Right. So I was really lucky during the last conclave with Francis. So being a theology teacher is an interesting thing because typically in a Catholic school, your teaching students have gone through theology class for like their entire life.
Yeah.
And I was public school educated. I was really excited to become a theology teacher because I'm like, oh, I get to teach all these students things about theology that I find exciting, right? And they're just going to love it. Because it's when I started learning about my own faith when I was in high school, that's when I kind of got excited about it. So I remember my first day of teaching theology, right? So I got my whole lesson plan ready, and I already had a couple of jokes ready, right? And I'm just like, oh. And so I was in a room of the sub-basement of the school. So there's a window way up high, and there's a escape, like a stairwell you could escape over the fire. So I remember, okay, first day of teaching class, and kids are all looking. I was teaching freshmen, and you love freshmen because they show up the first day, they got like one shoe on, this confused look at their face. And there I am teaching them, right? And I'm like, okay, here I go, deliver my first planned joke. And the room was silent.
What was it?
And I kid you not, in that stairwell outside the room, this is not a joke, there was a cricket that was going chirp, chirp. I swear to God. And it was another proof point for me that God does have a sense of humor because that was going on. The second day I got in there.
We know you
gotta
remember
have
the
the joke.
joke.
You gotta have the
Come on.
It was a self-deprecating joke about my hair.
Okay.
So that
right.
it's the go-to that I
Okay.
try to
All
make
right.
people comfortable
You were
realizing.
bald even back then?
Oh,
Balding.
Chrissy, I don't
Careful.
want to.
Balding.
Balding.
Please, we've
I'm
already
sorry.
covered this, Chrissy.
sorry
I'm a
if you
little
missed the first
sensitive.
Go back to
episode.
I'm a
episode
little
1.
sensitive.
Yes, I apologize.
We already know she doesn't listen to the podcast.
Chrissy,
Yeah.
I
That
don't want to
explains it.
brag. I don't want to
Yeah.
brag too much.
Yeah.
But like, I started losing my hair at 17. So listen, not everybody can do that as
No,
well.
you're
not
right.
everybody. I'm very
That's-
talented. Very talented.
Quite an art.
So my second day of teaching theology, it was as if the kids were all looking at me with such a despairing look on their face. And they didn't say it out loud, but they were saying it in every way, shape, or form, and nonverbal communication of like, boring. Can you please? So I learned then that I needed to like come at it a different way. And so the last time that there was the conclave, Francis, that's when he was elected. So we talked a little bit about the religious symbolism of it and then got to some of the things we're discussing today. What are some of the fun cultural pieces of it? And so what we ended up doing to kind of get them used to all who are the Cardinals, we did like a March Madness bracket in the class. And the winner got like a $25 Chick-fil-A gift card.
All
That's
right.
fantastic.
Good to note that Francis was no on anyone's bracket.
Really?
And I would bet to say Provost was not on anyone's bracket. He was kind of a dark horse.
Oh,
if you
yeah,
will.
absolutely.
Last two conclaves were dark horses were Cardinal Ratzinger, who became Benedict XVI 3 popes ago, was a very, like, when we were going through the conclave, he was one to be like, oh, he's probably going to be elected pope. So last two have been fun.
Benedict's a great pope to bring up
Mm-hmm.
because of the historic act of stepping down,
Retiring,
which
yeah.
is supposed to be, the only way you stop being pope is when you die.
Yeah.
He did not. Now, he was not the first one, or
Correct.
the only one, right?
Right.
But had not happened in a very long time.
Yeah.
And remarkable. Do you have any thoughts on why? I've heard different people say why they thought that happened. Do you have any thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think it's also kind of how the conclave goes. I think why it's so interesting to so many people. It's a very simple process, but from the Catholic understanding of it is they're really depending on the Holy Spirit to guide them in the process of picking the Pope. I think Cardinal Ratzinger, who was the chief, what's the right word? He was for when Pope John Paul II was Pope, he was like his go-to guy when it came to morality and kind of what's his like chief theologian, if you will. And I think that was a very strong man of prayer. And I do believe that one of the reasons he stepped down is just through his dedication to prayer and being guided by the Holy Spirit in a different way, that's what led him to do that, because you see a very different pope step in with Francis at a time when the church was in need of some kind of a renewal, if you will. And Francis definitely brought that. So those are the points that I would connect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I in a very different way, I was having a conversation with someone, and they brought up a really interesting point. If you think historically, 2,000 whatever years of popes, lifespan was a lot shorter a long time ago. Not even that long ago, but even fairly recently. But you see this really rapid turnover of popes because they didn't live so long, in the past. Now, totally different, where you're living, 80, 90, close to 100 years. That's got to have some impact on the idea of leading a global religion when you're dealing with your own challenges at that age. I find that interesting, and I think for me it was really interesting to see how Francis managed that he hid nothing. Well, sorry, I know. Did not give the appearance that he hid anything, which I thought was really a pretty phenomenal thing when so many cultural forces tell you, don't show your frailties, don't show your weakness, don't show your age. And here he was just being out in the open about, I'm declining, I'm failing. And he didn't mind, somebody helping him out of a chair in front of I don't know how many media outlets and so on. I thought that was pretty remarkable how that changes in terms of the Pope's influence.
Yeah, I think it's a big marker, too, of where his focus was in his paper. He was very outspoken about getting to the margins of society. My favorite quote of his is he's talking to bishops and priests, and he said, you need to have the smell of the sheep on your hands, right? And so when you're very purposeful and intentional about living among people, knowing their suffering, knowing their challenges as a leader, being transparent with your own gives them strength and really gives them permission to embrace those struggles more than trying to hide from them or being ashamed from them. Very outspoken about those things. So again, I think he set a different tone for what the papacy can look like and is hopefully setting the church in a new direction in that way.
Yeah.
Do you think that Pope Leo will continue that?
It feels like that so far. It feels like he's very much like an extension of where Pope Francis kind of left off. And I think partly Francis brought him in to leadership at a very important position before he becomes elected pope. He was in charge of the office that helps decide who becomes bishops, right? And from bishops, you get cardinals. From cardinals, you get the electors, right? So I think he was really in the same camp as Francis, as understanding the new kind of, I don't want to say new, but a more focused direction on the church really extending outside of its own walls and really putting priority on those on the margins of society. And it feels like his entire work, for the most part, was in Peru, working in very poor areas, and being with the people. And I think that has the feeling like he's going to extend what Francis started.
With the sheep.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you that I can't get used to hearing a pope speak English.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's my whole life. The pope English was never their first language.
Yeah.
And now you've got a pope speaking English and you can hear some Chicago in that.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get used to.
If you hear him say sausage, you can hear the sausage. You can hear it in his voice. I think it also demystifies the papacy a little bit more for Americans.
Sure.
I think the Americans, and I wonder what Italians or those that from Argentina or when they're from your home country, it must have done that for them as well. It's certainly done it for me.
I mean, this has got to be a shock for it's a shock for everybody,
right?
People in the U.S., but one of the things I heard, of course, everybody speculates during a conclave, but they're like, "Oh, it's going to be an Italian pope. We got to get back to we need heard it. Oh, got it traditional. Got to have an Italian pope," and that's very familiar and comfortable to Catholics and non-Catholics. If you follow the Pope as a political leader, cultural leader, and so on, but kind of remarkable to hear a guy just speaking English.
I know. Can you imagine being his brother?
Oh,
no.
The two brothers.
The
cameras showed up at their houses.
He meets people, and you're like, "Oh yeah, you got family. Yeah, I got family. What does your brother do? I've got a guy. He's an accountant. What does your other brother do? Oh, he's the Pope. Like, what? That's amazing. And I remember, I love they were interviewing his one brother who confirmed that he was not a Cubs fan. Originally, and like right behind him was like a McDonald's bag. I was like, isn't that American? Isn't that? He's from America.
Well, what I loved is his phone rang, and it's the new Pope,
right?
And he said, "Okay, just so you know, there's a bunch of cameras on right now. How are you doing?" I thought that was
his brother.
They were in his living room interviewing the guy, and the Pope called him.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. It's just the Pope.
No, he probably was like, "Hey, I see you on TV right now."
Yeah. And you wonder too, like, how giving is the Pope going to be like hosting Christmas? Because you got to imagine, life's got to be like a wonderful.
Wouldn't that
if
be
he's
awesome?
not hosting,
what should we do for Christmas?
Right.
Can we go let's go to the Vatican.
Yeah, we're going to the Vatican this year, Mom.
I guess we'll see in the.
Call Leo.
Right.
Mom, call Leo.
Maybe you can do a private mass for us. Oh, is he too busy? Come on. Yeah. That's the other thing, that the culture in Chicago. Chicago's very proud that he's there, but give it time, because they'll probably, like, if you ever visit Chicago, you'll probably hear people like, oh, you think you're so, like, they're very critical of Chicagoans of like, don't be too big for yourself, right? Don't get out of yourself.
Well, isn't the parish he grew up in is shuttered? Did I hear that?
I don't know. I have not heard. I don't know.
I had heard that the parish that he grew up in when he was a child was shuttered, that it was no longer, and that there were people wanting that to be reopened as a basilica. They want it to be. What is the difference between a church and a basilica?
It's a very, very good question. So basilicas are the official churches of the countries and where they're located.
That's going to be hard to do in Chicago.
That is going to be. There's basilicas throughout you can have multiple basilicas in one country, right? So there's one, there's in Washington, D.C., there's a basilica. There's a basilica in... Is it Minnesota? There's one in New Orleans. I think we've got 4 or 5.
Okay.
And it's where if the Pope ever comes, he would go visit and be at a basilica and things like that. So, yeah. They're more like the more official churches.
It'll be interesting to see if it goes from shuttered to basilica. That's a jump.
Wow. That would be a jump.
Yeah.
But if anybody can do it, Pope Leo.
So you got to help me with one more, clear up. I know there's a bunch of myths and a lot of things about papacy. Is it accurate? I've heard people say that when you are selected as Pope in a conclave, there have been cardinals who have turned it down.
Correct.
That's true.
Really?
You can turn it down. Yeah, you do not have to accept it.
Do they announce that? Or do they?
That's one of those things that's supposed to remain secret.
Okay.
That they don't really release that out. And so, and then they go up and say, will you accept it? And they have to say in Italian, or Latin, I forget which one. Okay, I'll accept it, right? And then, they go. And then do you know what they do next?
What?
They go to the room of tears. Have you heard about this?
That is a phenomenal story, isn't it? Alone.
Yeah, they go and they have already selected, like, they have pre-made cassocks, white cassocks in like small, medium, and large.
Cassocks, the vestments.
The vestments, sorry. Yeah, the big white, the white robes, and those are called cassocks, and where they wear that.
Not something you put your feet on.
And you can think like it. No.
It's a hassock?
Hassock.
Yeah. You would think like, it's a pretty overwhelming experience, right? You've now just been elected Pope, right. But also, and so it's very overwhelming. Like, you've got a lot of things you're talking about earlier. If you're going to be, I think of the presidency, and you see like Abraham Lincoln pictures before and after he becomes Pope, and even Barack Obama and like how much he aged.
Right.
It's going to happen to those popes. There's a lot on their shoulders. I also wonder, like, you're going to be wearing all white, and you're going to be in Italy.
Hot.
It's hot, and like the pasta there's delicious.
Yes.
You've got to give a lot of speeches. Your ability to keep spaghetti sauce off all those that is not easy. That's a big lift. That's a lot of pressure.
That's hard.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
That's hard.
So how long are they in the room of tears?
I think it's up to each and every one of them, right? I think some of them have been there longer than others, but again, that's something that typically doesn't get released. But even this last time, if we were watching, I think it took a while for him to come out.
Wouldn't you be just?
I'm like, I don't want to go out there. I don't know if that's how I would be weeping in fear.
Was he by himself?
So usually he's by himself or by himself for a period of time while he's in there.
You would want to compose.
Yeah, a little moment. Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I
would think.
Or why me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do hear a lot of people talk about that in the room of tears, that suddenly that's the experience when you realize, as weird as it is to say this, I've heard so many people describe it as a burden.
Yeah.
Like, I'm taking on this unbelievable burden for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's it sounds so harsh to say that, but when people said it and described it that way, it does make a lot of sense. It's got to be an overwhelming weight.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what you even saw in this conclave. I saw a lot more in this conclave than others, and they talk about, what's the exact saying? If you walk in as a cardinal, if you're walking in the conclave hoping to be pope, you're going to walk out as a cardinal.
Yeah.
Because the mentality of being a good leader, and especially in the role of pope, is you want someone that's going to come into that, like, this is an act of sacrifice and service. This is not something that's supposed to be glorified, or you're doing it for honor. Yeah.
Wow.
And then can you explain who announces the Pope on the, of course, you got to do the black smoke, the white smoke.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the balcony. Because
Okay.
those are the big moments everybody sees on the news.
Right. So the black smoke and white smoke, let's start there. So when every cardinal makes their vote, they walk up individually and they drop it into that pitcher. And then they do, like you saw in the movie, The Conclave, they do string it together one by one. And then if they have enough votes.
And it's just a majority, right?
It's just a majority. Yeah, 2/3 majority.
A 2/3 majority.
2/3 majority. And then if they don't have that, they take all those ballots. And I also think it's interesting, they're instructed to disguise their handwriting, which does feel a little junior high to me.
It does.
You know, it's like, do you like me? Check box. To it. But if they don't have enough votes, then they put a canister of a chemical that allows it to be very black smoke. And then recently, in the last couple of conclaves, I forget which one, they also started added ringing bells when it's white smoke. Because at nighttime, sometimes it's hard to hear or hard to see the white and black smokes. They've started adding bells to it. And if it's white smoke, it's when they do have the majority of the votes.
And don't they have to install that for the conclave? It's not up in the Sistine Chapel.
Right. It's not up in the Sistine Chapel, and it is the Vatican City Fire Department that does install the chimney. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's there. And then they come out on that balcony, which is, there's a name for it that I don't remember. And then there is the person that makes the announcement is also the person that's in charge of the entire conclave process, right? And I forget the title of that as well. I'm a really big expert here. I'm glad that you brought me on. Yeah.
But that person is not a cardinal eligible for a vote, right?
They could be, right?
Oh, they could
be. And so it could end up being somebody else, from my understanding. But there's a couple people on the balcony, right? So you've got the person like, Habemus Papam, and everyone's like, yay. The other person I really like is the person that holds the microphone. And isn't that on brand for the church?
Of course.
Because you want to say to them, listen, we've had some pretty big advancements in microphone technology.
Yeah.
That thing is like, it's coming from like the 1960s or 70s.
You're right.
But hey, it still works.
They got the money. They could afford to get a new one.
They certainly do, but maybe they're cutting corners somewhere.
Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah.
So they announce it and they present the new Pope.
Right. So they announce, there's a whole kind of script that they use in Latin to kind of announce who the Pope is. They first announce his Christian baptismal name, and then they announce what his Pope name is going to be. And then that's when the Pope comes out.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then they have the inaugural Mass, which just happened last Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like an inaugural ball? Is there a ball afterwards? Is there a big party?
That is a great question. I don't know, but let's just say there is, because wouldn't that be fantastic?
Wouldn't it be great?
There has to be some kind of reception.
Speaking of pasta, come on.
I mean,
gotta have good food.
And I imagine this is probably a tradition in all faith lives. After any kind of big church event, there's always like a dinner or desserts.
Bingo night. Come on, we're Catholic.
There's going to be a raffle. I'm sure there was a raffle, right? Definitely bingo.
Right.
There had to have been.
Bake sale. Always a bake sale.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest thing in the movie Conclave that made your head explode? Like, oh, come on, they don't do that. Because a lot of people, I think, viewed that more as like a documentary, which, of course, it was not.
Right.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think that, generally speaking, it was just the dramatic nature of like the where it comes to head, they're in the cafeteria and they're like yelling at each other. Like, I've been around church leaders and they're not that exciting to that level. They're exciting one-on-one in other ways, but they're not going to kind of be that. So that was a little bit like, but to be honest, I'm a audience member. Like, it was entertaining, right? It was there. So that was kind of the biggest thing. I would think my favorite thing about that movie was the spirit of the person that ends up getting elected, right? I think that is a message of like, I think Francis is kind of in that position. It sounds like Pope Leo's in that kind of camp of just like really being focused on being a service to the primarily the poor and marginalized in society. So that was the biggest takeaway.
What do you think do you think there will be rephrase the question. Do you think that Pope Leo will bring about any big changes?
That's a good question. From if we're looking at it from like a church teaching practice standpoint, I don't think so. But I do think the change that's going to be made is that continuation of Francis and like, what are we focused on and how are we living out the faith from a top-down standpoint? What are we prioritizing? How are we talking about things? How are we trying to bring more people in? I think it'll be more felt in the changes he brings as more of the enacting of the faith than it is any of the core teachings of anything.
Because a lot of people that I know have fallen away for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And you brought it up earlier, times are a-changing.
Mm-hmm.
The church hasn't really, and we joked about me never being able to be a pope, but why can't I be a deacon? I mean, the church needs women. They need more of us women to be in a service position.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like the timing is right for that. And with him being an American, I don't know. I just have a feeling or hope that maybe he'll change things a little bit.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, I think that even see what Francis did. He included, I think it's 3 women in pretty upper level decision-making positions within the Vatican itself, which sends a strong message to, yes, the church needs women helping to make decisions and help lead, right?
Right.
So I think in that spirit, and that kind of talks about that, what are we prioritizing? How was Francis leading? How is Pope Leo going to lead? I think that's in the spirit of those kind of changes that we see. Will they change teachings around who cannot be a deacon or anything?
Right.
That's hard to tell. That would be a much bigger change than just how we're carrying out certain things. So I don't know. That's a very good wondering right now, I think, for many people.
And can you I shouldn't say predict, but how do you react to having a pope from such an entirely different cultural background? Now, we keep saying from Chicago, true, but lived for many, many, many years in Peru. So there's tremendous American influence, America in the broadest sense. So what's your reaction or your thoughts about how that's going to impact his papacy?
I think he comes from a place in Chicago that's solidly middle class and very middle class family. And then he goes off to Peru, and I think very middle class to lower income. And I think gives him a much more popular worldview. What I mean by that is how most of the people are seeing the world, right? He's much closer to the vast majority of people who live in the middle, lower classes. And the perspective one gains while being in those communities or living that way is something you can't learn in a book or you can't learn from. It's something you just experience. So I think that, and you saw this with Francis too. I think that's what helped Francis lead in a way that we hadn't seen in the church for a little bit. Pope John Paul II had a little bit of that too, and he had a pretty unique upbringing, and he brought a lot of that, especially early on to his papacy. But I think that's what's going to have the biggest impact is just his experience being from America, but spending most of his professional life in Peru. It gives him a worldview that's much more holistic than just very siloed into how one country might see things or how one
like Italy or the Vatican
or Italy like Vatican,
right?
Yeah.
Great. This has been wonderful.
Well, I think we did a pretty good job of not making this religious or political.
I think so.
Well
what
done.
do you think?
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Tyler
Very
Mayer.
nice job.
Phenomenal
Tyler.
job.
I tried my best.
Great blend of history, culture. Really good.
We need to have you back, and we'll just talk about jokes and improv.
Did you? You didn't talk about
teacher.
that. You're an improv teacher.
Yeah, somewhat
coach,
retired improv coach.
No, who?
Well,
that was
I guess you're never.
That
retired.
has not been announced.
No, not officially.
Well, then it's not real.
I guess that's true.
That's that's a
I will say that's
announcement.
one of
no
my most proud. I have 2 proud professional achievements as an improv coach.
Okay.
One is years ago, we, as a school, Bishop Chittard, won what we would refer to as the state championship. There's a tournament of about 13 high schools doing improv games. Have you ever seen the show Whose Line Is It Anyways?
Of course, yeah.
It's kind of what it looked like. And we came from behind and we won one year. And it was so exciting, right? And that was the last year that they ever had that competition. So officially, to this day, Bishop Shard High School is still the funniest school in the state of Indiana.
There you go.
So that's one thing. I'm most proud of that. Two, we ended up having to rename our school, our improv team, for lots of different reasons. And I sat the team down. This is right when school was ending for the school. I said, next year we're going to still do improv, but we have to change up how we do it. We have to rename the team. And initially, when I told the students, they were upset because they thought they were hearing that we had to not do improv anymore.
Gotcha.
I said, no, we're going to do improv. We just got to come up with a new name. And in about 3 seconds, 2 students at the same time, it was as if they had a meeting and they, before this, said, if we ever need to change the name, here's what we're going to call it. Because 2 seniors at the same time, within 3 seconds, pointed at me and in unison said, the Bald Eagles. And I was like, hold on a second. I am not bald. I am balding. So to this day, the improv team at Bishop Shard High School is called the Balding Eagles.
I love it.
And that's a proud achievement that I have an improv team named after me.
And that is a perfect way to wrap up our discussion.
There it is.
We started with balding, we end with balding.
It's the full circle.
Yes, and all the hair in between.
Well done, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is a great joy for me.
Fantastic.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
It's a lot of pressure to have to represent 2,000 years of church history.
Yes.
Especially when multiple times when I'd be like, yeah, I don't know that.
But you're transparent, and we love that.
I tried really
You're
hard.
honest.
What
you
can
did
I
a great
say?
job.
We'll take care of all of that in the
Can
editing.
you edit that out?
All
But
of
that
it.
insert like a Antonio Banderas like voice that says the right answer.
We can do that.
That'd be great.
What if I give you a star for your performance? I'm going to put a star on your paper.
Like a gold star?
Gold star. Very nice.
That's
Perfect.
very nice.
Thank you for joining us. This has been a wonderful time
Awesome
with your
time.
time. I guarantee it. Boy. Dr. Rob, thank you.
Thanks, Kristi.
Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Yes. We'll do it again.
Remember, find us any podcast platform, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Thanks, everybody.
Braden, Chris, thank you very much for your work behind the scenes. And we'll be back with another fantastic guest. I don't know how we'll top this one.
Worth your time.